Before we begin the formal the formal panel, we'll begin with a short recitation from the Quran. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim, siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Ameen. This is the Fatiha. This calls upon God, the compassionate, the merciful, that we we worship and only turn to help from the God of the Day of Judgment. And we ask God to guide us to the right path, the path of the blessed ones, not of the cursed ones nor the lost ones. With that, I'll turn it over to Sarina Rasul.
Thank you, Hussein. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our panelists. Thank you so much for coming. Assalamu alaikum. I am Sarina Rasul. I am the Community Engagement Specialist here at the Smithsonian. And I just wanted to briefly talk to you about a little bit about our project that helped to bring this event together. Before we do that, though, I do want to send a special thank you and shout out to the programming team here at the Smithsonian, who has worked tirelessly to put all of these pieces together. So our programming team, I think they're outside, but Demi and Nicole and Janice, thank you guys so much. And the AV team, you guys have been wonderful, appreciate it. So thank you. And then, of course, to the Reed Society and Aisha for helping orchestrate all of this. So just a little bit about the Arts of Devotion. The Arts of Devotion focuses on, so the project that this is under is called the Arts of Devotion, and it focuses on the religions of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam. These religions are living traditions that have origins in broad geographic area of Asia, and now they're global religions in numerous countries, including the United States. The Arts of Devotion initiative engages with communities from these religious traditions, as well as other key communities, to help deepen our ability to tell stories about these artworks. These are stories of continuity and disruption, of travel and transformation. These artworks live in the museum, but have lives that extend far beyond its physical walls. We have several exhibitions that we've ran recently, and coming up, we will have an exhibition called Beyond Rumi, which will be a fully digital exhibition highlighting Sufism in its diversity and multiplicity across the world. I'm so glad that you were able to join us today, and we hope you enjoy the programming. And with that, I will pass it to Aisha.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Dr. Rashid, Sarina. This is a beautiful opportunity today to hear two very mighty, beautiful women that I have followed for a very long time. Aisha Gray Henry on my far left, and Demi, also Charlotte Hunt. And Aisha Gray Henry is the founder and founder of Fons Vitae, which is a Islamic book publishing house, a seventh-generation Kentuckian, a writer, a teacher, among so many other things. And Demi is, if you don't know, she's a award-winning children's author. She's written books about Jesus, the Dalai Lama, the legend of Saint Nicholas, Muhammad, Guru Nanak, and most recently, the wisdom of Solomon. And her books have sold over 500,000 copies, and her work has been appreciated by such diverse people across the globe, such as the Dalai Lama and the Pope. Demi's book about the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, was named a Kirkus Editor's Choice Selection, a book list Editor's Choice Selection, and was cited in the Publisher's Weekly as a timely, exceptional, handsome biography that serves as an excellent introduction to Islam and won the Middle East Book Award. So one of the reasons why we chose Aisha Gray Henry and Demi to come and share their life experiences and their work was because for me, as the founder of Reed Society, I find it really compelling for American Muslims to think about our tradition in a broader way. Aisha Gray Henry, as I mentioned, she said the 8th generation Kentuckian, and she has a very illustrious background in American history. But also Demi, her great-grandfather was William Morris Hunt, and he was a very famous painter. And her great-grand-uncle actually was an architect and designed the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, as well as the base of the Statue of Liberty. So for me, it's extremely powerful to think that these people that we read about, and maybe we set aside mentally and think, what do they have to do with me, my experience, are actually deeply, deeply connected to, well, we're all connected, aren't we? But deeply connected to me in a very intimate way. So with that, I'm going to begin with their background a little bit. Aisha, why don't you share a little of your, I don't know, how you came to doing what you do, basically bringing forth titles that we heard about, like Imam Ghazali, but had no access to.
Well, since we're gathered for the Maulid Nabi, this I wrote in 1982 or 3 for my children living in Cambridge when we founded the Islamic Text Society. But how did I get into all of this? Ghazali. When I graduated from Sarah Lawrence, I majored in Hinduism under Joseph Campbell. Islam wasn't taught.
Whoa, Joseph Campbell.
Yeah, he was my Don. And so then I was always drawn, as we both were, to a spiritual, I wanted to be a sanctified person, and I was sad because I didn't see a way. And then the man who became my husband, a Venezuelan, we were in the New York Public Library, and he was reading books about Islam, and I pulled over the autobiography of Imam al-Ghazali, the Munkadh min ad-Dalal. Wow. And I read it, and I thought, I don't even believe this. And there's a line, it really gets me. Ghazali said, I'm on a crumbling bank, up and away, if not now, when? And here I am, old, and I'm just trying to do the up and away and become nobody, right? It's really, so I loved it. And then my husband and I were given a scholarship at Al-Azhar. We drove from Tangiers to Cairo. Our daughter was born in Libya, our son Mustafa in Egypt. And then we had 10 years at Azhar, etc. And then we moved to England and opened up the Islamic Text Society in 1979-80. And that's when this came to be. Martin Lings was writing his Life of the Prophet. So I did one based on that for my children. And this has become a classic. It's in many, many languages. And so then the Ghazali issue. So we had to get back to Ghazali, and Abdul Hakim Winter had just gotten out of Pembroke, and he started with the book 40, the book on death. And so we began the process of the Ghazali series. And all is going well, and inshallah, within 4 years, we'll have all the 40 out, the Text Society and us. We're finishing them right now. And then the issue of children came up, and illustrations. That's why we're here together. And so Hamza Yusuf called me once, and he said, my children go to an Islamic school, and it's not working out. And so what about Ghazali for children? And I had grandchildren. So we began and started with the Book of Knowledge and getting it illustrated and getting a Templeton grant for $1 million to make a series like this. And so at a certain point, I met Demi. And so we've been talking on the phone for a decade and doing beautiful books. She did the Ghazali book. She did the painting Heaven. She did the book on prayer, right? So we've been talking, loving the same things. And imagine meeting her yesterday for the first time. and like we fell in love totally. So that is my story of Ghazali.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell, yes.
Demi.
Well, it's hard to know where to begin. Speaking about drawing and painting and art, I've just always loved it. And trying to just describe it, I realized I really couldn't do that, so I started making something which looks very strange,
I hold it.
but is like this strange bunch of green papers. But if you count to 3 with me, maybe something magical would happen. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. I got one more, in case you didn't believe that. These were really, started making these, cleaning up my art studio on the floor, putting the scraps together. But here we go again. 1, 2, 3, magic.
She made this.
I worked with children a lot too, and it's really fun to do all together. You can fold up anything. You can even fold up a dollar bill or something and, give it as a birthday present. But in my family, for really generations, everybody's been in the arts. And the first stories I started hearing about my great-grandfather, William Morris Hunt, the painter, was of his travels to the Beaux-Arts in Paris and how he studied with the Impressionists. And he painted out in the fields with the Impressionists. And his very best friend was Jean-François Millet. And then he carried back, rolled up in his suitcase, to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, where he was teaching painting, and was so instrumental in bringing the first impressionistic exhibit to America. And in reading about his lectures on painting, it's just incredible. He's always saying, speaking about the master and the apprentice, he says we have to realize God is the master, and the apprentice is our heart.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
And he said, there are no tricks, there are no gimmicks. Just listen to your heart. Reach the place of inner stillness and just flow, and the heart will flow. And so that was the great-grandfather saying this. He just said, follow the light, and life is a miracle. That's basically his whole lectures on painting. And then my mother was a marvelous watercolorist, and she wouldn't teach me anything. We lived in a old New England farmhouse. The house was pretty small, but it had a gigantic barn. And on the second floor of the barn was my mother's studio. And as soon as I could crawl up there, I crawled up and tried out all her best brushes on all her best papers. And I drew on all the walls with lipstick and glue on the floor, and once even carved all the piano keys with a nail. And my neighbor, my father's best friend, had been building a sailboat by hand, and it was just beautifully polished wood. And so when I was 2.5, they said I crawled in there and painted the whole thing, because I found a bucket of black, gooey creosote with a huge brush, and that was my first mural. Anyway, my mother just believed too. She wouldn't teach me. She just said, you find it out, you find it out. Look to heaven and follow your heart.
Oh, wow.
And then, so she found a school where they didn't really teach anything, but you could paint. And so she sent me to the center of Mexico in the San Miguel de Allende, where there we were suddenly painting everything, the bottom of swimming pools and fronton courts, gigantic. And even in the cathedral, we did a gold leaf dome, and you could even paint on canvas or paper too. You could also do weaving ceramics, jewelry, whatever. Then she said after a year, she'd found 2 wonderful teachers. I could have 2 teachers. And these were the extraordinary nuns of Immaculate Heart College in Hollywood. So she said, get on a bus and go to Hollywood, which is what I did. And
At 18? Or...
yes, and it was just amazing. There, if you had any gimmicks or tricks or anything, they would immediately undo everything you thought you knew and started you seeing again the same way from the heart. And the first assignment with Sister Mary Carita, who at that time was becoming so famous with all her silkscreen prints in all the museums and all over the world, and she was on the cover of Time and Life magazine. She actually was about 4'5" and terrifying. Her drive. And the first assignment was to go home and bring back the next day 500 drawings. Because, she said, the first drawing you do will just be full of the self. You'll be very self-conscious. You'll be very full of yourself. And by drawing 49, you'll be less of yourself. By about 200, you'll be getting pretty good. And by 500, you'll have a masterpiece.
Oh, that's great.
And so that was how we worked there. We just, we did so much. It's just unbelievable. And there was no real order to it, except it was magical. People were hearing about it, and classes weren't even, they were called something like Lettering and Layout 101 or 102, but there would be Fellini in the hall, and then they'd say, he's your teacher for the day.
Wow.
Or Charles Eames, Charles and Ray Eames, or many of the Hollywood actors and actresses, like Vincent Price is a marvelous painter, he was always there. Or Henry Miller, the writer, just adored the nuns, and we were always, we were doing everything. It was just incredible. And so, am I still on the subject? I can't remember.
Yeah, you're on the subject. And Sister Corita, and she taught you from the heart.
Yes, and then because of so much mountains of artwork, then I won a Fulbright scholarship to India. And that's where I began to see all the wonders and start learning all over again in many dimensions and directions.
You were there for a Fulbright.
Yes.
Yeah. And you had a moment on the mountains. That's right? Where you learned the place where miniature painting
Oh, yes.
was created, or?
We were sent to, I also had to teach English as part of the Fulbright program, and that was in northern India, in the area of the Pahari School of Miniature Painting. And it was just extraordinary being there because the light was just so different. I mean, everything just seemed so clear and beautiful. It was a special place, and I began to wonder how in the world did they make these gorgeous paintings and with such clarity. And I began to study this too and realized their paintbrushes were so delicate. Sometimes by using a brush that was made out of one mouse whisker. And I mean, and the colors, cinnabars and real paints that were hand mixed and ground. But then they would practice for hours and hours and hours, and yet the idea there really was to let go of the mind. The painting was not a mental construction. It was a natural flow of the opening of the heart. And when you can put your mind away or let it disappear, and then life flowing through the heart, and the paintings just flow, and I think that's how they're just beyond belief. They're so beautiful. And I began to work that way and realized that if you can get into that place, the books just draw themselves. They go. And it's like one thing from beginning to end, and it's so joyous. It's like like dancing when you finish something. I mean, not that it's that good or anything, but the joy and the joy of making it and doing it is just a marvelous, wonderful, marvelous experience. I'm so grateful.
That's beautiful. One of the things that I also wanted to talk about was the overlap between the creative field and spirituality, which is where you were kind of headed. One of the things that Aisha, you wrote, I read in a book that you had stated, we are muhajirin, people emigrating from the world to the spirit. There's a hadith by the Prophet ﷺ that anyone who migrates for God gets God, and whoever...
Life takes on the quality of that.
That's right.
And then if you go for the dunya, the whole quality of your life life is worldly.
Is worldly. Actually, when I used to read that hadith, I always thought it was that you actually had to physically move from one place to another to get the benefits of the migration. But this is a very beautiful way of thinking about movement, right? It's moving from outward to inward, and moving from the world into like a space of maybe light in heaven. So that's very beautiful. How did that apply to you when you were doing your work as a writer?
Well, that's the whole thing, what you've just said, and what we've been talking about. It's how do you get from the misidentification with your narrative, your package, I'm so-and-so, I'm from here, I don't like spinach. How do you finally get away from that stupid conversation in your head, judging others, everything else, and finally realize that pure divine essence, the fitra, the primordial nature, Christ nature, Buddha nature, whatever you want to call that. And so that is the aim of the Ghazali Children's series. And what's so amazing is I thought I was doing it for children. I'm really doing it for myself. Because as Hamza Yusuf said about Ghazali's Ihya Ulumuddin, it's the Quran in a usable order. And all those passages of Quran and Hadith that are floating around, they're all put in the entire process. It's a map for emptying yourself of yourself. And I think it's the most important thing for young people and old people to have a map that will take you bit by bit, unraveling the mess that you are to this beautiful diamond point that we all are, the oneness of being. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that's the intention, but it does take training, right? It does take a map, as you said. And I think, I mean, like, that's something that we strive to do at Reed Society, which is, promote the art and the music that has been, that people have trained under a master, someone who knows, and it is transmitted from the heart to the heart. And I think that having a teacher like Sister Corita or having a map that Imam Ghazali has laid out is extremely important to a spiritual aspirant in their journey. And I think that also when people are striving towards heavens, you could say, another space opens up, and you experience that. And I think, Demi, that's what you refer to quite a bit, about how the heart flows when you're working. But the question is, how do we excuse ourselves from the table? And that is really hard. So where do you think that your Imam Ghazali project, I know it's been translated in so many ways, what is the future of it?
Well, what she said earlier about the joy, just going through, I'm not a writer, I'm a school teacher. I teach world religions and art history and filmmaking, and I just learned to publish by the Islamic Text Society, but I wasn't writing anything. And when the children's books began, this is where it got, as Martin Ling said, demonstrated to me that we really are, everyone in this room, we really, we were talking about this yesterday, that our skills and our strengths we didn't give them to us. We didn't give our parents our place in time and space. Everything we are is on loan from God. It's a trust. We can take no credit for anything we do because I've noticed it just was going through. And where is it going? I mean, I started about 8 days ago. I knew I wanted to write an 8th book, it's a book that we're bringing out of Ghazali, book 24, called The Bane of the Tongue, the scourge, what bad speech can do. And I somehow couldn't sit down to write it. Just like I was scared. I didn't know how it was going to go. And I just sat down. And, imagine just writing it straight. Certainly I had the materials and I'd picked out passages and ideas. But I saw it just went through. And then when I finished it, like last Wednesday, I had the panic attack. Where would I get the illustrations of the beautiful young people who had been in the golden cave and no longer spoke and only smiled? And I don't know, where was I? And all of a sudden, I thought of someone in Dubai, and I said, could we have your children? And all of a sudden, we have these beautiful illustrations. And I went out in the backyard and sobbed and went over to my husband's beehive and just said, praise the Lord. Because actually, it is just going through, and it is joyful.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're all part of this incredible interconnection, la ilaha illallah. Everything it's God's divine order and plan, and we're taught to believe in it, and it sounds like a great idea, and we believe it with our minds, but we don't say our lives through it. When something bad comes, do you really say alhamdulillah? Yeah. Because we don't build up to that trust. But by the time I've been through this project with the grants and the people coming in from right and left and the demis, actually, you know what? I get it. Something bad happens tomorrow, I'm just going to watch it. It's part of a perfect setup. Yeah. So that's what I've learned from this project.
Wow. Demi, would you like to read something?
Well, I was thinking with all the wonderful words, really true, and that all is one. We're all one. And I was thinking of, there was a time I was asked by 3 different publishers, Simon & Schuster and Scholastic and Henry Holt, to do 3 different books at the same time. And those 3 books happened to be Buddha, Muhammad, and Jesus. And so with each book, before I would begin, I'd make a storyboard and write, what is this book going to be, and just sort of get used to the general flow of it. And I realized it was the same story. The story of Buddha tells of his miraculous birth, heavenly blessing, deep meditation for the truth, overcoming worldly temptations, enlightenment and ministry, miracles, death, ascension, everlasting life and eternity. Muhammad, etc., miraculous birth, meditation for the truth, inspiration and enlightenment, ministry, miracles, death and ascension, and everlasting life. And so by the end of that, I just thought, life is beautiful and magnificent and miraculous and one marvelous and indivisible truth, and that all is one, and there is no God but God. Which led me to the great Dr. Syed Hussein Nasser, when I picked up his book on Islamic art and spirituality and read things like Islamic art is the journey of the soul from the visible and audible to the invisible, which is also silence transcending all sound. Wheresoever ye turn, there is the face of God. Quran 11:109. Or God is the light of the heavens and the earth, light upon light. For God guideth his light to whom he will. For God coineth parables for men, and God is all-knowing of all things. Quran 24:35. It's all one. It's all miraculous, marvelous. I have about 100 copies of his book, and I can't stop reading it. It's just beyond brilliant. Which then goes to, you can say this properly, illallah.
La ilaha illallah.
Yeah.
That's what she was saying, yeah.
There is no God but God.
That's right.
There's no duality, no distance, and so everything is God. The rivers and the trees and the mountains and you and the people you love and hate are all manifestations of God. For the moment one sees that all is one, love comes by itself. And there is the great, extraordinary, real love, total, deep, intense, and great. This is the love that calls for rejoicing and joy, that calls, there is no God but God. Illallah, you say it. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So that
So
brought...
true. Demi, we're gonna, wrap up, but we can't not mention your beautiful late husband.
Oh, yes.
And I think you should share just a few, stories of him, because he was so important to you, and so he's important to us. And his training is how you have tried to, that's your map, right?
Yeah.
His training is your map.
Well, Gray was just marvelous in doing his life story, Journey to the Unknown. His birth was, he didn't even know, some year, probably about 1940, in Chongqing, China, with the Japanese dropping bombs on Chongqing. He was number 10 in the family, and he saw brothers and sisters killed before him, and his mother said, I have found a spot on a junk going down the Yangtze River. I want you to be on it tonight, and I hope to see you again sometime in life. So his journey to the unknown began at the age of 9 alone. And by the time he got to Wuhan, he was very, very sick. And he told me, he said he really felt he had died. He remembers rising and looking down. He could see his mother somewhere sobbing and saying, I cannot leave, you cannot go. And so he said he willed himself back down again. Somehow got to Shanghai as a stowaway on a boat to Hong Kong, then Taiwan, where he really lived in a tent. He was a tent person going to sometimes to a library or to a class in a school or somewhere. No education, really. At one point, he joined the Taiwan Navy, where he said there was, the BBC was on and they were speaking English, and he said all of a sudden he got the key. That's how he learned English. Just, I mean, his way of doing things was like no other I ever heard of. Then he found a way to get out of Taiwan, and all of a sudden he was in Columbia University, graduating summa cum laude, and took the first job he could get, which happened to be in healthcare, and became the head of healthcare for the state of New Jersey, and was honored by Reagan for doing the greatest job dealing with the most difficult elements like the mafia, and and he said he would shut the door after his meetings and just simply go into the lotus position.
Wow.
And we met by accident in New York City. I had been researching Chinese art in Chinatown, and I had bought a great Chinese lacquer umbrella. It was red, bright red, for all of $2.50 or something. And I just loved it, and I was waiting to cross the street, and up pulls an identical red Chinese umbrella. And there he was, and it was like we both recognized each other. He said, I know you, and I think I said, I know you too. And that's how it was. We just then began my extraordinary entry into Chinese Buddhism, Chinese Qi, which is so comparable to the flow of life in art, and all the Tai Chi, Qigong, Wushu. And we represented the United States at the first International Book Conference in Beijing, when it just was beginning to open up. And it was just extraordinary. It was just extraordinary. Many Europeans were in the conference and trying to tell China what to do, how to do books, how to publish. And my husband, Jesse, was the last one to speak. And he got up and he just said, don't forget who it was that invented paper. Don't forget who it was that invented the paintbrush, ink, movable type. And the whole room just erupted. He was the conference, and it was almost like a change in history. It was like finally after so many years, it was just extraordinary. And he wasn't even supposed to speak. It was that's a little bit, but he's a devout Buddhist, and his passing was phenomenal. He looked to pictures of his spiritual teacher, and then he looked up with, it was just clear light in his eyes, and then he lay back down on the pillow smiling, the most beatific smile I've ever seen. And at the same moment, his living Buddhist teacher was giving a lecture 50 miles away in North Bend on the medicine Buddha, and he suddenly stopped and he said, I've just seen Lien Guang, his Chinese name, Lien Guang, ascend to the Pure Land. It's just extraordinary. It's so beautiful, I wanted to go too. It's just, I've never seen a more powerful moment and a more beautiful and more meaningful. And so much since then, I've just been seeing through things, seeing through things, seeing through. And also silence too, and joy, and all from the heart. And heaven.
Something in the book that when he was a little boy before he made it out to America, I remember that there were opportunities that arose, and he always thought, this will compromise my principles.
Oh, wow.
That's why I thought this was a good book for young people to read. They would say, don't touch your fitra, don't hurt your dignity.
Oh.
Yes.
And our husbands became friends,
Yes.
Jesse and Neville. Neville was typesetting, and we did films together, and we became a great family, loving, having never met. Wasn't that something?
Wow, yeah, so you published the book on her late husband's life, right?
Yeah.
What's the title?
You've got it on
The
the
slide went by.
There
There
it
it is. The journey.
The Journey to the Unknown. Okay, I
also
have to
did-
get that one.
He did a wonderful book that we published. He took the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is basically instructions on how to transfer. And the one we all know, the Evan Swance, is a really big academic book. And she did the drawings, and it's a manual on dying and transfer. And all people really love it now, the Buddhists and the Tibetan Buddhists, because they can use it. And he did another on the Bodhisattva that you illustrated.
Yes.
What was that called?
A Maitreya, Bodhisattva,
That's
the
it,
coming
yeah.
Buddha.
Yeah.
All about speech.
Yes.
Speech, what we say, how important it is what we say. Speak from the heart.
Yeah, otherwise be silent.
Yes.
And apparently he had drawings or reminders to stay silent.
Oh, yes, our house is, you walk in the door, and actually there's a beautiful tanka that was given to us by the Dalai Lama. And it's Guanyin Bodhisattva with 1,000,000 hands. And everywhere there are Buddhas. You can't even go in the kitchen without the kitchen god being there to bless you.
Oh.
And everywhere,
Reminders, yeah.
reminders.
Beautiful.
And also messages of silence, silence, silence. Even on the door, he posted a little sign that Buddha had said, but then he added, watch your mouth before you go out.
And that
Such
leads
a-
us to the book that we've just finished, the one that was just finished last Wednesday.
Yeah.
And what I'm recommending, because when you hear the 20 things we do with language, because it's very sacred to be able to speak, we should never say anything that's not beautiful. We should never argue. We should never have a bad thought that's assuming anything, because that's talk in our minds. But in the end, you know, it's about being as silent as you can. And in the story, it takes place in Ramadan. They finish studying these 20 things you can't do. And then it's the last 10 days of Ramadan, so the village makes iktikaf, and they all go into silence for 10 days. And I said last night to Jane Casewet, I'm going to try one day at a time. What about one day?
One day.
All day long, and then you'll see. I didn't need to say that. That was showing off. You know, really have a look at what's going on. We don't. We're just floating along talking about it.
Yeah.
So we're going to hit on the silence thing.
One day. So I think I have to open it up to questions because we just have a few more minutes. Does anyone have any questions? Think about it. We're being silent.
They're practicing silence.
There's a question. 2.
Takes time.
Thank you all. These are very, very inspiring stories. Thank you all. These are very, very inspiring stories. I wonder, do you have any advice for young artists or writers who might be in the audience today?
Is this too?
You go ahead.
Oh, advice for young?
Writers and artists.
Oh, my goodness. For a while, I did a lot of drawing with children. Say, like using one of my books and showing pictures that I had done. Early on, I did many books for very young children, like Find Demi's Dinosaurs or something like that. I would show the slides, and then in, say, like an auditorium, I'd have strips of paper with markers, and all the children would be sitting next to it. And just to get an idea from, say, like the dinosaur book, I did it because nobody knows for sure what color the dinosaurs were, but then the children could make them anything they wanted to. And they did. These strips of paper were just filled with instant masterpieces, and also with poems and everything. We would hang them up all over the auditorium too. And I just think to get to a place of just start with a springboard of something and just follow it, just keep going into it, and do it again, maybe again and again, and more ideas will come. And it's a wonderful way of working.
I think that repetition part of doing something like 500 times is also a good piece of advice. Do you want to say anything?
Yes, I just taught 2 of my grandchildren art history, and I made sure that they understood that art history is really just illustrated religion and mythology, so that it's not just stuff they're doing, but there's inner meaning. So you can combine, when you're teaching art or literature, even all of these ideas of what are the deeper things you want to convey. And I found it just wonderful to, whatever I did, I showed how that tradition, let's say cave painting, was done in China and Argentina and Lascaux all at once. And what could it be when they cut off their fingers and they put the hands on the ochre? What were they saying, I am here to, And then, of course, we don't really know, but we have to assume that truth is universal. And Joseph Campbell Esket just keeps getting reclothed by different imagery and different traditions. But there is a metaphysical truth underlying everything. Absolutely. So you can go for that and then take that anywhere with children. But I think children need to constantly be given a sense of, first, who they are, and secondly, there is meaning and purpose, and that the trials and their many disappointments are all opportunities to keep their golden heart polished, and they don't have to worry about death, because this is forever. And so the Ghazali opens the book of knowledge. The first 3 chapters show that to children so that they can build then on, they already know what life is and who they are. And I think a problem you have with so many young people today, zillions of them, is they don't think they're anybody. They're taking their image of themselves from Facebook or internet or whatever. And it's very frightening that they don't have a sense of their inner dignity, their purity of nature and their goodness. And so I think if I were going to do drawings or art or storytelling with the kids, I would get them to write ideas that build on that. Problems I'm having, I'm disappointed. Oh, but this is how I can reframe it as. I would use these moments of working with younger people to help them establish themselves in reframing an incredible image of their own reality, which is the universal reality. I think that's what I do at this point.
I think culture, something, I like what you said about art history. I think everything that's culture related is always from that point in the center of the circle, which is revelation, inspiration, which is our connection to the divine. And everything else has come from that point. So I think that's a good way of looking at art history, certainly. Yes?
It's such an honor to meet you. I'm a former history teacher, and my life changed actually when I taught world religion.
Can you hear her?
You give her the...
I really love your books, and I have 9 of them here to get your autograph. But I was wondering, like you said, the message is one, that we're all one. And where do you see beauty in humankind? And is there a place you found in the world that really moves your heart?
I couldn't really hear.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I got emotional. My kids will get upset at me. But I was just wondering, your books have so much beauty and so much heart in them. It must come from somewhere inside, but also life experience. And I was wondering, where have you seen beauty in humanity, and where have you seen beauty in this world?
I guess the aim is to see it everywhere. But I think, too, part of the training with the nuns in Immaculate Heart College, drawing millions, and they would have us, as I say, give a subject, say like a Persian picture or something. They'd say, you just have to look at everything Persian, look at the architecture, look at the clothing, the fabric, just study everything, everything, everything. It's like as much as you can find on any subject, and then you could begin drawing, and then draw it your own way. It just carried over to anything. The beauty of India, seeing everything you could possibly see, and rejoice in it. The beauty of it, the beauty of Chinese art, the beauty of Japanese art, the beauty of anything, Guatemalan, Brazilian. Anything. Just immerse yourself in it and find the greatness and the heights of things is endless, endless, and joyful too.
Do you want to say something?
Well, I'd only like to say about where you find beauty in people and places is that really all people and all places, but I mean, there are moments where human kindness, you know, people who, when we were traveling across North Africa, poor people in Algeria who took us in and gave us their best and gave us their only bed. And when I saw that, it's the true sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, or the methodology of the Buddha or of Jesus, is putting the other first. So somehow is when another person, you're gone and you do 100% for the other, this is when you see that moment of absolute beauty. You know, and of course, I like mountains, frankly, for nature.
Where to go?
Thank you both. Thank you all for such an incredible, incredible, and inspiring panel. I have 2 kids of my own, and to have a series like this is just so special, and to have access to these. So thank you all, and thank you to our wonderful panelists.